everyone, and welcome to the Season 3 finale of Monday Night Travel. My name is Ben Green, and I'll be your moderator this evening. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our travel guru, newly back from traversing in the Nordics, Rick Steves. Good evening, Rick.
Well, Ben, thank you. It is my pleasure to pour a little beer here and welcome you all to another evening of Monday Night Travel. And all over Scandinavia, you've got wonderful craft beers and you've got happy people drinking their akavit. And I'm going to have a cultural experience tonight with you. Thank you for joining us. I'll have a little of this. It's called the Water of Life. And those Vikings, they just throw it down in one chug, but I'm more of a sipper. And I like it. And it's typically drunk with the beer. And one thing I like is the exchange rate is so good in Scandinavia now that a beer won't make you broke. 10 crowns in a dollar. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But thanks for joining me. I look forward to sharing my adventures and my travels. I just got back a week ago from a wonderful month traveling. And I want to share with you the most important lessons I've learned as much as I can pack into the next hour. We need to have our sustenance and we need to have our excuse for a cultural edible experience. So I have made a nice little foursome of open-faced sandwiches right there. That's rye bread. Now, in the past, I've made open-faced sandwiches with Vasa crackers or with French bread. But right now, this is rye bread. And Ben has studied in Helsinki, and I've spent a lot of time in Helsinki and Tallinn. And those folks there are really into their rye bread. We can hardly find it in our grocery stores, but there's racks and racks of different kinds of rye bread over there, and it is so good. So I made these, and when I showed this to my staff right away, Lisa and Ben said, "Did you do that?" And I said, "Yes." And then I sent a photograph to my friend David, who's in Twin Cities watching, and he's an amazing cook. And he says right back, he texts, "Did you do that?" I did this. Anybody can do this. You just got to have the ingredients and a little bit of creativity, baby. I got my smoked salmon with a little bit of hard-boiled egg and a red slice of red onion on there. I sliced up little cherry tomatoes, and I've got my herring. You got to have herring with your rye bread, and the herring goes very nice with your akavit. That's for sure. I got some little shrimp, and you can make your own rules. I've got some hummus there with cilantro. It's spicy, and I'm not even sure if that's kosher, but we're going to try it and see. And then I've got one here with the hard-boiled eggs. And just in case I get more hungry, I've got my backup piece of rice, morgenbrød here, and we're going to just have a lot of fun talking about the culture. Thank you so much for joining us. And what I want to do is dive right into this trip because I was very busy working on my guidebooks. I got to say, I spent 20 days basically researching. I was working on this book, Scandinavia. I rip it up into two parts. So the 5 cities that I was in are in these sections. And every day I would go out and I would just come home with my books marked up like this. And then I would spend my wee hours at the laptop trying to figure out what does that squiggle mean? And for me to be able to bring this home and to know that we've got that page right now really well figured out. You know, you can read in the New York Times today about AI. What is that? Artificial intelligence, writing books. There's even a guy named, Mike Steves, that's writing artificial books. If you read 2 paragraphs, you know if that person was over there updating it or not. And our books are updated in person with great love, and we love to share them with you. So I'm going to just share with you the experience I had from 20 days of researching. In my schedule every day, it said G10 and G6. That was my code for have a guide at 10 o'clock and a guide at 6 o'clock. A guide for the daytime activities, take a little break, a guide for the evening activities. I love to call my wonderful staff together on my deck. We're so thankful to live where we live. It's a great springboard for exploring Europe, and we're back at it. We're all hands on deck. It's 100 of us working like crazy because we got so many good things happening. And then the next morning, I celebrate packing light. That's what I live out of exactly, no more, no less. I've never checked a bag lately. All I want to do is carry that thing on. And it's so important to have your, and they check, you're carrying the airplane size big bag and your little day bag. Those both have Rick Steves sewn into them because we designed those bags. and they work great. I wouldn't change a thing on either of them. That is my home every year for several months. Well, this was an unusual trip because I started it and I ended it with things going on in the United States. I was a tourist in Vermont. We visited Ben and Jerry's because, and there's my partner Shelley and my daughter Jackie and her husband Damien and their beautiful little baby, my grandson Atlas. And we did a little sightseeing and we dropped by my niece Kaylee's wedding, and that was a lot of fun. And it was a great opportunity to see if I could actually tie a tie and get the family together and celebrate. But there's our wonderful little future tour guide, Atlas, and the world is his playground. His mom and dad know how to get him out there, and that kid's going to be a great traveler, and no wonder his name is Atlas. Then I flew from Boston over to Reykjavik, and people on the East Coast, man, they just can zip over to Reykjavik for a nice 4-day weekend. And I met my crew. Of course, it would be Carl on the camera, and it's like a rock band. Carl on the camera, Simon wearing the producer's hat, and Cameron. And Cameron was our guide for this trip. Cameron is my right-hand man in writing so many of these guidebooks, one of the most prolific authors that I know. And Cameron spends as much time as I do, even more, researching in Europe. And Cameron, he spearheaded the writing of our Iceland book. And I'm so proud of this book, and Cameron did a great job, and it was high time that we got over there with Cameron and with the crew to make a TV show. So the first 12 days of my experience was with the crew, and then, as I'll explain, I let them go to do the whole ring road, and I flew over to Copenhagen to do my research. But we started in Reykjavik. And Reykjavik is, well, Iceland's a small country, as you probably know. I think it's got a population of 400,000 people. And you can see half of those people from the top of the church spire. This was the view from my hotel room of the harbor of Reykjavik. This is the view from the top of the church. And Reykjavik is just a charming town. It's a very easygoing town. And I just love the readiness and the pride they have in their culture and how tight the community is. As a matter of fact, I love a swing set, and all my life a swing set has been in a straight with people swinging parallel to each other. Well, in Scandinavia, there's a very tight and sort of loving and passionate sense of community. And it just makes sense to make your swing set a circle so the kids can have fun swinging, looking at each other and laughing together. And I just thought that is so Nordic, that is so Scandinavian. There's a statue right on the shore called the Sun Voyager, and it's a celebration of the 1,000 years that people, the first settlers, came to Iceland and the proud heritage that they have in their beautiful country. And when you look around Iceland, you got to realize one thing unique about Iceland is it is essentially powered by thermal power, hot water coming out of the hot part of the world. And you see these pipes all over the place, and that's their heat. And when you see that pipe going across the countryside, it's probably heading into Reykjavik. And there you realize so much is powered by that thermal power. You've got water, hot water that heats the homes, and it is under the sidewalks, as are the electric wires and so on. And they've got all the warmth they can handle. To turn down the heat, they just open the window. You can see that one little window has a tiny square window built into it. Well, that is just how they would cool down. They'd crack the window because they don't care about heating the outdoors. They've got free heat, essentially. They can tap into that free heat to make amazing spas and thermal baths. Now, all of us tourists, when we go to, excuse me, I'm going to just have a little sip of my lovely beer and then try some of this akvavit. Yeah. When we go to a thermal bath in Reykjavik, as a tourist, you're going to be tempted to go to the Blue Lagoon. It's a beautiful place. It's a great experience. It's filled with tourists. It costs about $100, and you got to make a reservation in advance. Or for about 1/20 of that cost, you can go to the neighborhood bath, and you can hang out with locals, and you can have a much more down-home experience. It's not right or wrong, but you've got that option. And 9 out of 10 tourists, without even thinking about it, just go to the big, fancy, expensive touristy bath out by the airport. That's fine. But I like to go to the neighborhood bath. And that's what we filmed on our TV show. And the chance there is it's the perfect It's the great equalizer. Everybody's equal when they're hanging out in their bathing suit in the bath, and you talk with everybody. It's a great opportunity for a tourist to meet a local, not at the Blue Lagoon. You'll meet another tourist. That could be fun. But just at the neighborhood bath. Every town's got a neighborhood bath. There must be 6 or 8 of them in Reykjavik, the capital. I had the great fun of taking the film crew into the flea market. I love to go to a flea market, and I've long wanted to get another sweater from Scandinavia. I love a good sweater. I wanted a used sweater. I wanted a sweater that had the patina of age. And I found a wonderful merchant there in the flea market, and she found just the perfect sweater for me. And I thought, that's pretty expensive. And then I said, could you just throw in a hat? And I'm so proud of myself because she tossed in a hat, and that's one of my favorite souvenirs. It's a very high fashion hat, and I've got that hat now. And it's a reminder of the fun that I had when I was at the flea market in Reykjavik. When you take off from Reykjavik, if you got a short trip, you really just want to see the capital, and then you want to take this. It's about a 3 or 4 hour drive to go all the way around, but you slow it down by great sights all the way. That's your single best day trip out of Reykjavik, and that's called the Golden Circle. And I want to show you the top stops on the Golden Circle, and one of them is a place called Thingvellir. And Thingvellir is it's where geologically, it's where the tectonic plates of Europe and of America come together. And if you want to talk like a geologist, if you say, is Iceland in Europe or America? The answer is yes, it's in both. Half of Iceland is America and half of Iceland is Europe. And then through the middle, you've got all of these volcanoes and activaries, because that's where things are happening as they rub together. You can actually walk down this ravine here, and America is on one side, howdy, and Europe is on the other side, bonjour. And it's a very cool thing to do. And then you realize that 800 years ago, the tribal leaders of Iceland gathered here. This was their first gathering place when they had their island-wide, country-wide, culture-wide parliament. They're gathering. And they didn't know the geological importance of this place, but this is where Europe and America comes together, and this is where the historic families and tribes and leaders and warlords of Iceland came together. Half an hour up the road from there, we've got a good example of the power of nature in Iceland. This is Gullfoss, the golden waterfall. And man, oh man, it was beautiful when we were there filming, but it was windy and spray and really tough to film. But we got great footage, and that's that. You get so close to that fountain, and it's an amazing experience. A half an hour further up the road, you got a place famous for geysers. In fact, the word geyser comes from this place. This place is called Geyser, and this is where everybody stands around and they wait, and they wait. Whoa. And then they are surprised. I'm going to show you that again because it's so cool. There's no way you know when it's coming, so you got to have your camera all cocked and ready to go. Boom. A lot of fun. You'll see those geysers. Okay, now from Reykjavik, we made a half-hour TV show on Reykjavik and the Golden Circle. And then we made another half-hour trip show on going all around Iceland on the Ring Road, 800-mile circle. And we're putting them together to make a 1 hour special. Those will both be out on public television, God willing, next year. So we filmed our whole idea that, okay, we're going to hop in this car and we're going to drive around the island. And again, Iceland, it's almost uninhabited interior. Half of the people of Iceland are right in Reykjavik, which is down here in the lower left. And one road goes around the island. There's one highway, and it is called, I'll let you guess, Highway 1. 800 miles, no traffic jams, almost no gas stations. You got to know what you're doing to do this trip. And it is a trip it's the ultimate road trip, I would say, in Northern Europe. One thing I love about Highway 1 is every few miles, there's a little lane. Here's a lane. You can see it's hardly paved. And at that lane, you see the red spot on that map, on that chart there. That's where we are. We're just leaving Highway 1. Reykjavik is to the left, Vik is to the right. Those are two towns I really like because they're two towns whose names I can remember. I have a very hard time with Icelandic names. But here's a little, a side trip off of the main road, Highway 1. And what I like about this, in a schematic way, it tells you everything along that road. Everything. So you know where your hotel, your B&B is. You know where that little pub is. You know where the grocery store is. You know where the historic church is. Here's a little snippet of the fun we had filming that. Hey, I'm Rick Steves. I'm in Iceland and I'm on the Ring Road. It's an 800-mile drive around the island, and it takes about 30 hours if you do it nonstop. Got to give it at least 5 or 6 days to do it justice. You can go each direction, doesn't matter. We're going counterclockwise. And it's a great sort of simple, long, scenic drive. There's one road, it's called Highway 1. And what I like is that every little turnout, there's a historic explanation of what you might see in Icelandic and English. And you've got a little map that shows you every little farm, what's going on, what you might want to see, where you might want to get a bite to eat, or where you might want to spend the night. But we're filming it. My crew wants me to go down again and do it that way. And then we're going to make more TV because we're traveling together in Iceland. Happy travels. I want to remind you, with your open-faced sandwiches, you eat them with a fork and a knife. They're usually just stacked tall. I'll show you some later on in the slideshow here, but wow, I'm a good open-faced sandwich cooker, I'll tell you that. Now, the next stop along the way, we're going on the south coast here, and I stayed with the group all along the south coast before they went around the whole ring road, because the second most important side trip out of Reykjavik after the Golden Circle is the south coast. And you stop at a waterfall, it's called Seljalandsfoss. Foss is Scandinavian for waterfall, Norwegian and Icelandic both. And if you hit it at the right time of day, you got rainbows. Cameron knew all these tricks, and he made sure that we filmed it late in the day. This is like 6 o'clock at night, rather than in the morning, when it would have been kind of gloomy. But I'll tell you, look at this opportunity to park your car, hike in here, and go behind a waterfall. If ever you wanted to go behind a waterfall, this is it. Man, we were in a good mood filming that, I'll tell you. And then we wanted to do something that I had done on a previous trip when I was helping out in the book. It's the thing called Torsmork. It means Tors forest. And there's not many trees on Iceland, and this had a little forest in it. And you get in a big 4x4 with deflatable tires, so they can actually deflate the tires to get more traction. A car that can go through rivers without getting wet. And well, this is the kind of action you have. You can't just take any car up Torsmork. You hire a company that has these kind of cars, and then you go charging across. It's a great place for hiking. And if you're a hiker, boy, you don't want to have to take your shoes off and walk across a river. You're thankful that Iceland has put up bridges on wheels, because every year the little river is in a different spot. So they have to wheel that bridge around so people can go across the river depending on where it is that year. Cameron was very busy as we went updating the guidebook. So he's working on it, as other people from my staff, as we are doing our filming. And beautiful bluffs to show the wonder and the drama and the majesty of Icelandic nature. From the south coast, we took a little boat to the Westman Islands. And this is a beautiful side trip. And the Westman Islands are striking and memorable for a lot of reasons. And we'll talk about the volcano there, which buried half of the main town, in a moment. But they're famous for their puffins. And the people who historically harvested the puffins' eggs directly from their nests. It really upset the mother. But they would swing on a rope along the cliff in order to get to these nests. And we wanted to film this, so we had our local guide find one of the girls in the school who was a good swinger, and we filmed her. And I'll show you just a little video. I'm going to take another bite of my open-faced sandwich. I think I'm going to go for the herring next. And the herring goes with the akavit. They go together like perfect. And while you watch this, how we filmed the child, the student who is learning how to do historically what the locals did to get those puffin eggs off the cliff right out of the nest. I'm Rick Steves. I'm on Westman Islands in Iceland, and we've got a young girl from the village demonstrating how they used to get eggs from the nests. and the nests were with the birds over there. And they'd harvest those eggs in order not to starve. The kids to this day, they learn how to swing from these ropes like their grandfathers and grandmothers did in order to get the eggs to have a nice hearty breakfast. And this is how, with our TV show, we try to show the traditional life and how it intersects with today's reality. Here we go. Westman Islands on the south, just off the south coast of Iceland. Happy travels. That's pretty cool, I gotta say. And every bit as cool is a moment I just had. I just had a private moment here while you were watching her swing. I was having my herring with the rye bread and a sip of the akavit. And it was one of those times when, I mean, you always say, you have akavit with herring. It's what the locals do. But I gained a real magic moment there. It was a moment where I thought, yeah, rye bread, a little bit of onion, a little bit of cucumber, herring, pickled herring, and that sip of akavit. Perfect. It's a perfect marriage. So many things we can enjoy that we wouldn't enjoy otherwise if we don't reach out and try what the locals are doing. I'm fascinated with the fact that until World War II, there was almost no serious architecture in Iceland. Until World War II, until the 1940s, it was sod huts. There's no wood there. You have to stack sod to make a house. They didn't have metal. They didn't have plastic. They didn't have glass. It was a poverty-stricken little humble island. And then it was very strategic in World War II. You can imagine, as the United States and Britain were trying to beat the Nazis. And it became an important Navy base. And after World War II, Iceland got more money per capita than any other country in Europe with part of the Marshall Plan. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money because they don't have a lot of people, but per capita, it was the tops. And they did a lot of building, and there was a lot of surplus military stuff left over. And after World War II, still poor, they did a lot of building with these Quonset huts, these military Quonset huts. And I'm fascinated by that. And of course, they've really grown since then. And today, this is what you'll find. Beautiful condos that are adaptable to the environment. For instance, it's windy and it's cold. There's lots of sunlight, but it's cold and windy. So you have glassed in balconies and people enjoying their sunlight as long as it's there. There's a huge amount of tourism in Iceland, and Iceland handles it. I don't know how they do, but I would swear there's more tourists than people on that island. And the hotels are booked long in advance in the summer. They're quite expensive because demand exceeds supply. And Airbnb is just a godsend for people who are in the countryside looking for a place to call home. We rented this place for 3 nights during our shoot, and it was very comfortable. And that was our base. And that was just an Airbnb cabin out in the middle of nowhere. And at midnight, it was still light enough for me to do my work. Everybody's sleeping. I'm working on the script right there. And I just thought it's so peaceful and it's so cool that there's a twilight that seems to last forever. You know, it's very interesting for me because I like hard cash. I like a $5 bill. I like a quarter, you know. I like a €1 coin. But the tangible money of Europe is going away. And for the first 3 countries that I was in on this trip, I don't think I spent a single bit of cash. Everything was with a credit card. You'll hear this, and it's true. People don't even want cash. I mean, technically they take it, but you use your credit card, and you just slap it there, and you're all set. So get used to that. Kids, I was told, they don't even know what cash is. When kids want their allowance, there's an app called Swish, like our Venmo or something. And parents they say, I need to swish me or something like that. And the kids get some money on their phone. And when they need more money, they don't say, hey, Dad, give me $10. They say, can you put something in can you swish me? Well, we did a lot of using of our credit cards. And I'll tell you, groceries are cheap and restaurants are expensive. And if you're on a budget, you want to go to the grocery store. You don't want to go to the convenience store. This is a convenience store here. If you can help it, You want to go to a grocery store and stock up. We were stocking up here for our breakfasts in the B&B, and it's just a necessity, and it'll save you big bucks. So don't be shy about putting together a picnic and taking advantage of the little kitchen that's in your Airbnb. Here's an example. I was on my own after I left the crew doing some writing, and I just didn't want to mess with going out to eat. I just wanted to work all the time, and I wanted to feed myself well. So here's what I got for 5,000 crowns. And it's just very simple. The cherries, the cherry tomatoes, the carrots, all grown in greenhouses. They grow a lot of vegetables and fruits in Iceland, but it's in greenhouses. You got your rye bread, you got some meat and cheese and some yogurt. And if you look at the cost here, I'm going to zoom in on it, but you've got your bill there, and it comes to roughly 5,000 crowns. There's 130 crowns in a dollar. Now that seems overwhelming, but make a point wherever you go to figure it out. It's just very important. And here's how I do it. I'm no mathematician, but I made a point to figure this out. If you take off the last two zeros and cut what's left by a third, you've got dollars. If there's 130 crowns in a dollar, if you take off the last two digits there, it's 1.3, and you take a third off of it, it's 1. Okay. If it's 5,000 crowns, you take off the last two zeros, it's 50. If you take a third off of that, it's 35. Do you need an app to say it's 36.22, or can you just go with it's 35? Of course, keep it simple. But take off the last two zeros, cut off a third of what's left, and that's your crowns to dollars in Iceland. All that food for $35, that was like 3 meals. That's pretty darn cheap. So I spent the last couple of days in Reykjavik just working on my writing, having said goodbye to the crew, and they went around and did the rest of the island while I flew to Copenhagen. Wow, what a change to go from Reykjavik to Copenhagen. I mean, there's 400,000 people in all of Iceland, and there's double that in Copenhagen. Copenhagen has 800,000. Copenhagen has so much history. It's such a delight. It's so user-friendly. And if you're getting married there, you can even rent your flowers for 2 hours at a time at the city hall. It's pretty cheap, 150 crowns for 2 hours. There's 10 crowns in a dollar. That's 15 crowns for your flower at the wedding. This is the Copenhagen train station, and this is a very sentimental place for me because when I was 16 years old, I was on my second trip with my mom and dad. The first trip when I was 14, we went to see the piano factories in Germany and the relatives in Norway. 2 years later, my sister's turn to go, but she wanted to go to music camp instead, so she opted out of the trip. I got to go twice in a row, and we were going from the piano factories in Germany up to the relatives in Norway. We were in the train station in Copenhagen. I was literally on my mom's passport. Back then, the one photograph had the mom and the son, the little boy. I'm tethered to my mom and dad. I'm in this temple of good travel here, this Copenhagen train station, a classic old world train station. All sorts of exciting destinations in the old-fashioned Berlin, Stockholm, Oslo. And I looked around and I saw kids just a couple years older than me with their backpacks and their Eurail passes, and Europe was their playground. And I looked at my parents and I thought, I don't need you guys for this. Europe can be my playground too. And I vowed right then and there on this spot in the Copenhagen train station that when I graduated from high school 2 years later, I would go to Europe every year for the rest of my life. And until COVID hit, I had done that. And I've missed 2 years, but now I'm back at it. What a great spot. What a great inspiration. And today, the public transportation in Copenhagen is better than ever. I landed at the airport. It's expensive to take a taxi into town. I don't want to blow that much money. For $5, you can get on the subway, and faster than the taxi can take you, you get to within a couple blocks of your hotel. You can see there at the end of the golden yellow line on the far right, it says Copenhagen Lufthaven. And then in English, it says Copenhagen Airport. There's only one direction. Get on that metro, and you get off at wherever your hotel is. Mine happened to be at Norraport. Get off there and walk to my hotel. And I've saved $100 on the first hour in town because I didn't mess with the taxi. I took public transportation. How often does the public transportation go? Every 3 minutes. I mean, how can you not take advantage of that? There's no driver. It's all automated. It's all honor system. They don't even check. And every 2 minutes, every 4 minutes, there's a train coming by. Harness that. Take advantage of it. It empowers you all over Europe. They're dedicated to public transportation. One thing I bought right off the bat when I was in Copenhagen, and I'm slow at this, I've got to say, I'm not inclined to get things online and have digital kind of passes, but I'm determined to get hip with this. And I had a lot of fun this year doing stuff more digitally. I bought online my Copenhagen card. It cost me, as you can see there, 113 euros. That's about $120 for 3 days of unlimited entrance to all the sites and unlimited use of all the transportation, plus tours, boat rides and bus tours and so on. So it's a powerful pass. And the point is there's ease because it's on your phone. You just show your QR code and you're on your way. You can download that in a moment and it'll cover your ride in from the airport. This is how the public transportation is coordinated, the metro underneath, the buses there, and the bikes. And you'll notice the bike parking area is in a sunken area. It's down a little slope. It's in a basin, so that when you look around, the bikes are not in your face. They kind of disappear below everything, and they're not as annoying. The way the Scandinavians design their cities is an inspiration. And the way they show off their heritage is also when you go into their cities. When you're in a capital city, be sure you look at the national museums. Every country's capital, Oslo, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Helsinki, Tallinn, they've got great national museums that are an important stop before you venture out into the countryside. Here we have the lure horns. These things still play. They're from 1,000 years or so BC. I mean, for 3,000 years, those horns have been able to be played. And it reminds you how deep and long the heritage is. When you're in Copenhagen, it's all modern, it's all organized, it's all super slick. And then there's a place where people want to be more free. The slogan of this place is, "Only dead fish go with the current." People here go against the current. This is called Christiania. This is an anarchist, hippie, squatter community that's now 40 or 50 years old. The original people that took over this military barracks now are old ponytailed hippies. Here we have the gateway, Christiania, and when you step inside, it's a pretty it's a pretty edgy place, I gotta say, and it's a place that has a story to tell. And I thoroughly enjoyed dropping by the Welcome Center, and one of the old original settlers of Christianity takes travelers on a guided tour for an hour every afternoon at 1 o'clock or whatever your guidebook will explain. And then you learn how this life works here for these 800 people that really want to live in a communal, non-materialistic way. They're fine with marijuana and they're absolutely against hard drugs. It's the out of focus shot because I had to sneak it from a distance and zoom in, but this is the no photo zone where the marijuana is sold. It's called Pusher Street. But you get past that touristy zone and you see people just living idealistic lives. And then when you leave, you have a sign that says, "You are now entering the EU," as if the Christiania is not part of the EU. This is the old harbor of Copenhagen. It's called Nyhaven, which means the new harbor. But I suppose 500 years ago, this was the new harbor. Today, it's the old harbor with old boats. I understand if you've got a historic boat, you can moor it here for free. There's beautiful old boats there. And it's a zone that it was the old sailors' quarter. And it was famous for its booze and its brothels and its tattoos. Well, there's plenty of booze. There's no more brothels. And there's only one tattoo shop left. There's not much left of the old sailors' quarter. But it has that cool mystique. But what has happened is it became really popular because of that. And now I remember just a few years ago when this was the hangout of locals. But now everybody here is a tourist. And it's fun. I like it. But if you're a local, you don't want to hang out here with all the tourists. So you have been pushed across the canal. And there's a new bridge across the canal right here. It's an amazing bridge. It's called the Kissing Bridge, I think. Yeah, because it the sides of it come out and kind of kiss. And then if a big ship comes, they have to open up like this. But all the locals who used to hang here and sit on the edge of the promenade, dangling their feet over having a beer, now they're just across the big canal, past the Kissing Bridge, about 300 yards away. And they're doing the same thing there. No tourist here. All the tourists are at Nyhaven because that's the touristy place. And right next to this, a block away, you've got one of these wonderful food courts. And this is sort of a festival of street food. All these little stalls selling a whole array of inexpensive food, and it's a lot of fun. It's all outside, and it's a festival. You'll find that all over Europe these days. Well, one of my joys in my travels is to meet other people using Rick Steves' guidebook, and they're everywhere. And I get to talk to them, and I found out how their trip's going and where they're eating and how this is going and so on. And I spend a lot of time every night. I spend 3 or 4 hours visiting restaurants, and I spend 3 hours, and I'm just visiting during those hours that they're serving dinner. And I meet a lot of people with the guidebook that are eating there, and I get to ask them, "How's your experience?" And if they say it's great, if they say this is our second night here, we like it so much. I mean, what's not to like about that? It's a good listing. I found a lot of great spots to put in my book. As a matter of fact, Ben and Lisa have I sent in the latest of my restaurant listings for Copenhagen and for Oslo, and they're in the chat section. And you can download it there, or you will get an email tomorrow with that document attached. But that's the latest for next year's edition of the book that I wanted to share with you today. If you're going to Copenhagen or if you're going to Oslo, you can get all of the new listings in my book, like this place here called the Gorilla, Restaurant Gorilla, which is a wonderful new addition. Something I love is open-faced sandwiches. Let me just look adoringly at my sandwiches again, and it's bad style, but I'm going to eat while I talk because I got to try a little more looking at that open-faced sandwich. I'm digging into my shrimp, and you'll see lots of shrimp in this photograph. With my sprouts, with my little cherry tomatoes, with my hummus. But here, you see all the different varieties that you can have in an open-faced sandwich. Now, when I was a backpacker, I thought this is really expensive. But this is a meal. It's a light meal, and it's an artful thing, and you got everything you can imagine there in the shape of an open-faced sandwich. Let me take you on a tour of my breakfast at Hotel Ibsen, where I was staying while I was in Copenhagen. I love Hotel Ibsen. I've been going there for 20 years. And when we think about Copenhagen and high cuisine, we think about Noma. Noma was for a while, rated the best restaurant in the world and so on. It's way beyond my interest. I don't want to go to a place that good, to be honest. But Noma infected Scandinavia with this new sensibility. It's called New Nordic Cuisine. And there's actually a manifesto. The leading chefs got together. This is our New Nordic Manifesto. And it is, like you see here, it is local style, it is seasonal, it is with a heritage, it is homemade, it is nicely paired and matched with a good drink and so on. It's sort of the Norwegian and the Nordic equivalent of the slow food movement in Italy in a lot of ways. But what I was impressed by was there's New Nordic hot dog stands now. There's New Nordic open-faced sandwiches, and there's New Nordic breakfasts. The people that run this breakfast give me a little tour, and I want to share with you what I learned here. Forgive me because I'm whispering to kind of keep a low profile because I don't want to bother people. So you'll have to listen carefully and have everybody pay attention so you can hear me talking. But this is what you can expect to find at a nice breakfast, and it is so New Nordic. Here we go for breakfast in Copenhagen.
Good morning. I'm Rick Steves. I'm in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And there's more to traveling than just seeing the mermaid and Tivoli Gardens. There's a cultural experience. And this is the breakfast at my hotel, which I think is really amazing. It's called the Nordic concept. Everything is organic, everything is seasonal, everything is what you would find grown locally. So this is the station where everybody comes and serves themselves. You'll notice the plates are in the middle. And the plates are in the middle because then you survey everything and you waste less. You know what there is and you know what you want. The bread is all fresh baked from the local bakery, and you'll notice there's no toaster. A lot of travelers like toaster, but in Denmark, they don't toast. They have it fresh. Quantities are small. Quality is very high. And the stress here is really on, as I mentioned, local and no waste. For instance, no bananas, no pineapples, but fruits that are grown here. Homemade muesli, all the different kinds of milk and yogurt, potato salad. You wouldn't see that in an American breakfast, but that would be a Danish breakfast, the local muesli, garden fresh produce, and of course you gotta have some herring. Notice the servings are small. It's pre-served, so you don't waste. Where's the coffee? It's served at the table because the staff wants to get to know us. Where's the orange juice? Oranges don't grow locally here, but apples do. So we have apple juice, different kinds of berry juice, bacon and eggs, of course, but pre-served, and then the waffles. And waffles are a big deal because that's part of the cozy lifestyle of Denmark. And families have fond memories of getting together and having their waffles. Well, it's breakfast time in Copenhagen. Enjoy your day. Happy travels from Denmark.
Wow. That was just a beautiful experience. They really are committed to this whole idea of new Nordic cuisine. I mean, I had to get used to the fact that there was no bananas and no pineapples and no orange juice. And I liked it. It was really going local. It was going with what's sustainable. It was green. It was thoughtful. It was community. It's really good. Stay tuned to Nordic cuisine while you're traveling in Scandinavia. By the way, I'm throwing around the word Nordic and Scandinavia. Nordic is a broader term for everything north of Germany, you can kind of say. I think Nordic is Scandinavia, which is Denmark, Sweden, Norway. Nordic would include Iceland, Finland, and the Baltic states. I think that's the way it is. But the point is, Scandinavia is tighter, Nordic is broader, and this is called New Nordic Cuisine. This is my friend Richard Karpen, and if you've been to Copenhagen as a tourist, you probably know him as Hans Christian Andersen. Every day he gives a very entertaining walk, and he dresses up like Hans Christian Andersen, and he's just found his niche and he loves his work, and he's one of my best friends in Scandinavia. He's been in my book for 20 years, and he gives me a day of his time every time I'm in town. Excuse me, we walk around together, and he takes me these little hidden backdoor crannies. Look at this half-timbered town. That's how Copenhagen was 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And you don't find it outside, but you find it hiding away in courtyards, like this little place right in downtown. There's some great sites in Copenhagen. Every one of the Scandinavian countries has a king and a queen and a royal family, but they're constitutional monarchs. So they are limited, and they're just figureheads, really. But they do have a heritage, and they did used to be divine monarchs who ruled as if God said, you get to rule with no questions asked. And we've got a chance to look at, in the museums, their lavish royal lifestyles. This is the palace in Amalienborg, and they've got 5 different offices set up where you can look in at the living rooms and the offices of 5 different royals from 5 different generations. It's quite a beautiful, beautiful museum. And these are the kind of museums I check out, I enjoy checking out, and then I assess them and I remind you what you should be sure to experience and understand while you're at that museum and what you can skip, and if the museum is worth going to at all. Another big, exciting kind of experience in Scandinavia is the the open-air folk museums, not the Nazi resistance museums. And there's no Nazi resistance museum in Sweden because, as the Norwegians are quick to remind you, the Swedes did not resist. The Swedes stayed neutral. The Danes resisted and they were taken over, and the Norwegians resisted and they were taken over. And then they had heroic liberation movements and resistance movements. The Danish Resistance Museum burned down a decade ago. This was the first year I've seen it since it's been reopened. And frankly, I like the old one better. The new one is trying too hard, and it's a lot of interactive stuff and a lot of displays. But the old one was just kind of old school. It had all of the little artifacts, the way people hid their guns and cheated on their ration cards and blew up things that would anger the Nazis and so on. The open air, the Nazi Resistance Museum in Norway is still that kind of old school museum where you get a good sense, thanks to all the artifacts, of the valor of the people who went to the hills and resisted the Nazis. But while you're in Copenhagen and while you're in Oslo, you have a chance to see these Nazi resistance museums. Okay, now I'm going to fly. And when I went around Scandinavia, I went, from Iceland to Copenhagen to Oslo to Tallinn to Helsinki to Stockholm and then home. Most of those connections were flying. Tallinn to Helsinki, you don't fly, you take a boat. The airports are easy. They're well connected, and as you can see here, it wasn't very crowded. Coming into Oslo is the main drag, leading up to the palace. Karl Johan Gade leads straight up to the royal palace. What's new about Oslo is the development of the former industrial wasteland that stretched miles in every direction from the center of town. That was the old harbor. The old harbor is pushed farther away. The land has been taken over by people, and it's been designed in a very progressive way, where you mix commerce and residences and the environment and kids and retirees and young clubs and restaurants and cafes and parks and playgrounds. It's all so dang Scandinavian. And you got gardens on the rooftops, and you've got kayaks for everybody to use. It's just amazing. To explore that is really exciting. And what I've done is I've added a new tour to my Oslo chapter, which is a bike tour along the harbor. And they've actually got these old industrial containers that are numbered, and they're called information points. And if you look at them, they've got it in English and Norwegian. And they've got, so we're in Oslo now. You've got an explanation of what it was like in 1964 and what it's like today. And what I am very excited about, in Oslo, they've got the best bike rental program, city-run bike rental program that I've found anywhere in Europe. And you buy a membership online, as I did, for $10, 99 crowns for 3 days, 72 hours. And then with your app, you can see where all the racks are in the town, how many bikes are in the racks, how many open places are in the racks. And then you can go there and you can just say, I want a bike. It tells you what number your bike is. You grab it and you're on your way. And then you plug it into another rack somewhere else when it's time for you to do something without your bike. And then you grab another bike and you carry on. It's a beautiful system. It's a beautiful system. I was getting up at 5 o'clock one morning. I had to go to the airport early. And I thought, oh God, I got to walk all the way to the train station, 6-block walk with my bags. I didn't want to wait for a bus at that hour. I didn't want to mess with a taxi. I suppose I could have. But then I remembered, hey, the bicycle. And it was right across the street from my hotel. I had my pass. Bam, I got my bike. I just coast downhill to the train station and I'm on my way. It's a great system. As you explore the harborfront, you'll find a new phenom in Oslo is the floating saunas. This is a big deal. The Norwegians, like most Scandinavians, love their saunas. And this is where people relax these days. I was there on a rainy day, so it wasn't very active. But there's people soaking in there. There's people jumping off and swimming and sunbathing. And it's quite a beautiful part of your Oslo experience. Also, I noticed in the Scandinavian capitals, amazing new libraries. And just to step into a library, you see, this is definitely the library of the future. There is a reason for libraries. And if you question that, go to one of the great libraries in Scandinavia. There's a wonderful new library in Oslo. The best one I saw was in Helsinki, and also a beautiful one in Copenhagen. This is my friend Paul Johansen, and he is Oslo resident, a Norwegian, and he's one of our tour guides at Rick Steves Europe. And Paul takes our Scandinavian tours all around, and Paul helps us research our books. And Paul helped me for a beautiful day. I love my time with Paul. And this is the new museum dedicated to the work of Edvard Munch. And it's the biggest museum in Europe dedicated to a single artist. And for good reason, there's so much great stuff in this museum. 2 wonderful new museums in Oslo. There's the Munch Museum and there's the National Museum. And both of them are world-class museums. The opening exhibit in the National Museum is a grabber. This is a small segment of it, but it's just countless skulls of reindeer with bullet holes right in their heads, where they're all executed in an attempt by the government to maintain the population of the reindeers. And it upset the Sami people, and they have this monument here to the reindeers that were killed. Quite a powerful piece of art, and that's your kickoff into a very powerful museum, the National Museum, right on the harborfront in Oslo. I like the Scandinavian efficiency and streamlinedness. Here's an example of the efficiency of Scandinavia. You see right here the hours, and you see this all over Scandinavia. Monday through Friday, it's open from 5 until 1 in the morning. And then Saturday, it's open from 7 till midnight. And Sunday, it's closed. But at a glance, you can see this co-op grocery store supermarket is open every day from 5 in the morning until 1 a.m., except Saturdays, 7 till midnight, and it's closed on Sunday. big deal all over Europe, especially in Scandinavia, are the old industrial marketplaces that have now been turned into trendy food halls. And you've got a dozen or 20 different little restaurants here. You got communal seating, so everybody in the family gets to choose their own place. You got one place that's just for drinks, and then you all meet at your table and you have a dinner. And it's cheap, and it's trendy, and it's good quality, and it's with the locals. It's lots of fun. And there are more hippie kind of places. This is an old warehouse. It's filled with food, street food cars. And it's 6 or 8 places that serve inexpensive and great food, I found, right on the harbor front. On the very last day in Oslo, I stumbled onto a new bench. It's the Peace Bench, and it's at a curve like this because it forces people to sit together and talk. And in the front of it, it says that Nelson Mandela reminds us, we're right in front of the Nobel Peace Center, by the way, the best weapon is to sit down and talk. So here we are in Oslo, the home of the Nobel Peace Prize, with this beautiful new bench that reminds people, hey, let's talk. We can figure this out. Great thing about Scandinavia is how committed they are to green power, renewable energy, wind farms, electronic vehicles. A Tesla is a cheap car in Norway because it comes with so many perks. The government is subsidizing and incentivizing people to get their electronic cars. The new ferries in the Oslo fjord are all energy. They're all electronic. They're like floating Teslas. This whale tail shaped attachment there is a big battery charger. When the ferry comes into the dock, as soon as it docks, people get out, this whale's tail comes up, it comes down, it plugs in, and it recharges that ferry so it can make another sweep through the islands. I had so much fun with my friend Paul as he showed me this wonderful B1 line. It's a ferry ride that cost $4, free if you have the Oslo pass, and it just goes on 8 different stops around 4 or 5 different islands. You can get off and do a little sightseeing. You can go to a beach. You can enjoy the views of the Oslo fjord, including history, a bank of cannon, and little communities where people just go for their escapes to stay in their summer cabins. It's a beautiful, beautiful trip. It takes an hour, and it's a new guided tour in the new edition of my Scandinavia guidebook. Again, you will do a lot of things online. And in Europe these days, there's not much mercy given to people that don't have a smartphone. You need to do things online. It's expected. You need to be able to function without cash. You pay for it online. And a lot of people don't want to have your money in person. They want you to book it and do your spending online. And this is my ticket to go to visit my relatives 2 hours south of Oslo. And you get that QR code. I take a photograph of it, and then I get an email that has an attachment that has the QR code, and that's my ticket. It takes a little while to get used to it, but we're doing it here and they're doing it there, and Europe is ahead of us on that, so get used to it. 50 years ago this year, with my buddy Gene Openshaw, who you know from Monday Night Travel. We'll see more of Gene coming up because he's just written a novel about Michelangelo and his creative, amazing story in Florence in the Renaissance. But Gene was my buddy in high school, and this was our first trip when Gene was 17 and I was 18, and we were visiting Tor and Barrett and my friend Hannah, my beautiful cousin Hannah, who's now, I've seen her, she's of course not such a little tyke anymore. But this was our first trip when Gene and I were backpacking around Europe. Look at, that's Tor in 1973, and this is Tor in 2023, 50 years later, at the same train station. 2 hours south of Oslo. Tor met me at the airport, at the train station, and a couple weeks ago, Tor met me at the station again. He's a beautiful soul. I love Tor. He was my dad's best friend. This was back in 73 when I would travel all the way to relatives in Norway to get a nice meal. And this is me in 2023, traveling all the way to Norway to get a nice home-cooked meal still. And there's Tor and his beautiful wife, and a nice salmon dinner that they made me, and we just had a great time catching up. It's great to see Tor. All right, from Oslo we head east. This is the Baltic world, and this is the Baltic Sea. And this is a very old map, so it's not very accurate. But on the far left, you've got Oslo, then you've got Denmark and Copenhagen, and then you've got Sweden, and on the far right, you've got Helsinki, and you've got Russia, and you've got the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. We're going to go now to Tallinn in Estonia, Helsinki, and Stockholm. This is the view of Tallinn. It's very easy to fly from capital city to capital city in Scandinavia. Each flight is $100 and 1 hour. Tallinn has so much to see and do. It has a Russian heritage. So you've got this beautiful palace built for the czars when they were part of Russia. It's also got souvenirs of its heroic struggle for freedom. Tallinn and the Baltic and its Baltic sisters were part of the Soviet Union. And historically, when you got Germans on one side of you and the Russians on the other side of you, you're really in a complicated neighborhood. And the Estonians were hopelessly outgunned. And what they said is, just so people know we are here, we have to sing to let people know we exist. They sang for freedom, and they gathered here in their song festival grounds. And a third of all Estonians, a third of the entire country gathered here to sing together for freedom from the Soviet Union. This is where, in so many ways, the Soviet Union fell apart. And to this day, Estonians, they gather together and they celebrate their heritage. And as a tourist, we visit that park and we look at photographs of those heady days back in the 1980s when Estonians were leading Eastern Europe in their dramatic dash for freedom. Today, we've got the same problematic Russia. And this is the Russian embassy in Tallinn. And it's, of course, in bad regard by people because of what it's doing to Ukraine. And at most Russian embassies in Europe these days, you can identify them by all of the banners and posters and protests against the Russian brutality in Ukraine. It's a fascinating story, and you will see huge solidarity with the Ukrainians when you travel around Europe. Every city in this part of Europe has a modern zone to complement its historic zone. This is called the Rotterdam Quarter in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. And you find trendy restaurants there with trendy hamburgers. You find edgy, futuristic technology. For instance, this is called the Starship. And the Starship is a food delivery robot. And just like we have Prime that delivers us shipments from Amazon, and just like we've got Uber Dash or whatever, you've got Starship deliveries in Estonia by little robots. And when they get stuck, friendly locals get them unstuck and they go about their ways to deliver whatever food is on its way to its hungry owner. The market in Tallinn Baltijama is just an amazing place. And from there, a whole new edgy, creative foodie zone has erupted. And that's a new part of our book. And from Tallinn, you've got cruise ships and you've got ferries going in many directions, one less direction in the past because nothing's going to Russia anymore. But what I like from Tallinn is to get on the ferry, and it's a 2-hour ride to Helsinki. And the locals love this ride because it's got duty-free shopping. And when you're getting off the ferry, you'll find people like this guy with a whole trolley of beer or whatever booze he's bought, tax-free. And with the way they tax booze in Scandinavia, let's take a sip. Whoa, with the way they tax booze in Scandinavia, and this is 45% alcohol, so this is pretty highly taxed. You can pay for your ferry ride. You really can, by just buying that booze there instead of at a supermarket, at a liquor store when you're back home. Okay, now we're in Helsinki. I love the capital of Finland. It's a great place that has so much character, so much history, so much diversity. Here we have the Lutheran Cathedral on these steps where people historically have gathered. It's a sternly neoclassical piece of architecture. And just across the way is the Russian Orthodox Cathedral. And when you step in there, it's a trip to Russia. And in a lot of ways, you got more opportunities here than anywhere else to experience Russian culture. It's a beautiful, beautiful church. All over Helsinki, like all over the Scandinavian capitals, you'll find huge investment in modern architecture. This is the new Helsinki Library. And every one of my guides when I was in Helsinki, that was just on the tip of their tongues. You got to go to the library. And it's an amazing experience to go to this library. And they've got, recording studios, they've got sewing machines, they've got skis, they've got children's playgrounds, they've got sleeping zones, they've got everything you can imagine that can be shared by the public. It's more than books. The library this is the library of the future. And when you get up on the rooftop, you got a nice view of all the important buildings that surround you. At the Tourist Information Office, you want to be sure that you take a moment to see what's happening. This is just one day. You got all these different musical events, you got these different guided tours, and you've got other things that you should know about while you've got your limited time in Helsinki. I'm really so thankful for the help that I got from all of my guides on this last trip. Again, each day that I was working, I had 2 guides, one during the day and one during the evening, and they diligently helped me figure out every little bit. And then I'll be followed by more researchers from our office. As a matter of fact, our friend Ben Green, right from our Monday Night Travel Group, will be following me to Tallinn and Helsinki shortly. And Ben will be able to help finish off the work that I started as I did my best to update those chapters. This is the old market hall in Helsinki. And here is another excuse to take a bite of my beautiful, beautiful rye bread open-faced sandwich. You got to get serious about these open-faced sandwiches when you're in Scandinavia. It's an artful meal, I'll tell you that. Also, fish soup is a highlight, as are cinnamon buns. So many different kinds of cinnamon rolls. There's a tradition in Sweden called the fika, and every country's got their own version of the fika, but that's the mid-morning coffee break with a cinnamon roll. Go with the locals. Go to the markets, get fresh and tasty produce. And when I'm doing my work, I got to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of time to spend 2 hours in a restaurant enjoying a nice meal. I've got to visit all those restaurants. So I have a little dinner before I go out, and this is a hotel picnic. I don't recommend it, but if you're working, it's very practical. You can always have a hotel meal if you want to save $40, because it's going to cost you 40 or 50 bucks to go out and eat in a restaurant. It's going to take you a couple hours. For $5, you can have a picnic dinner like this in your room, and it's nutritious, it's fast, and then you can get out and spend that money doing something else. From Helsinki, the airport was quiet because it was July and people were on vacation, so there wasn't a lot of action going on. I was so thankful reading about the, to me, tragic heat waves that are going all over so much of the world, that I was traveling in the north of Europe during the heat of the summer. I like to avoid the heat waves. Every day this month it's been 100 degrees in Toledo in Spain. That's tough. Every day it's been in the 90s in Athens. That's tough. I just had one of our guides visiting us here, and he leaves Athens in the middle of the summer so he can have a little bit of break from that relentless heat. Look at the week that I was in Stockholm. Every day the high was 70 degrees and it was sunny. It was beautiful. It was beautiful traveling in the hottest time of year in Scandinavia. This is Stockholm, and I've been coming here ever since I was a kid, and I never get tired of it. Every year there's new exciting things to see and do and experience. This is a famous monument in the middle of the street in the pedestrian center of town, reminding people that Swedes are pacifists. They don't believe in a lot of guns. They don't have a lot of guns in their community, and they're thankful that they don't. The old town, Gamla Stan, is a center of tourism in Stockholm, and it's just a delightful place to explore. I want to give you a little quick look, mainly because I want to have another bite of my open-faced sandwiches, to be honest with you. But I went to the new exhibit in Stockholm's Nordic Museum, and there's a beautiful apartment built from after the war, from 1948. And this was the beginning of Swedish welfare society. This was the beginning of this notion that we're going to take care of the people in our community. Everybody has a dignity to be part of this family, and we're going to tax people heavily, and we're going to make sure that people have a dignified roof over their head. It's ideal in Scandinavia. They're as capitalistic as we are, but they have a more progressive taxation so that they can be sure that everybody has access to quality healthcare and quality education and quality accommodations if they play by the rules in their society. Here's the very beginning of that. Check out this little tour of an apartment that was state of the art. It was futuristic. They were so proud of it because before that, it was the Industrial Revolution, tough times where people were literally sharing beds at different times of day because they didn't have enough money as working class. This is the new working class accommodations from the 1940s until today in Sweden and Scandinavia.
Hey, I'm Rick Steves. It's 1950. The war's over. I'm in Sweden. I grew up in a little one-room house where we had almost no room, no modern conveniences, and now, the beginning of the Swedish welfare state, this is my new apartment. So we have a nice step in, and in the apartment, of course, you would have your neighbor right here, and you would have your garbage, and then stepping into your apartment, you would take your shoes off, and you would hang your coat, and you have a nice mirror. And then, of course, you celebrate your favorite politician, the Prime Minister, who believes in the social welfare state. I mean, everybody gets a nice, livable situation. You have your bedroom, and of course, that's where you would do your sewing when necessary. A simple little bedroom, and it seems humble, but before that, people actually shared a flat with other people. You would book certain hours to have the bed, depending on your work shift. Here's the simple kitchen, and the mom could look out the window and see the kids playing in the garden. You'd have your refrigerator. You would have your Swedish meatballs, köttbullar. You would have your spices and the latest in modern conveniences. And in your home that you're so proud of, you would have a nice modern 1950s era bathroom for the whole family. Imagine that. Your medicine cabinet, the whole works. You got a telephone, and this is the living room. It's the jazz era. The war's over. Good times are coming. You've got your relatives on the wall. You got your state-of-the-art radio. And outside, you've got your balcony. And you've got your neighbors all around. I like my new apartment, 1950, and it's only going to get better from there. I'm Rick Steves. Happy travels from Stockholm.
I like that new apartment, and I also like the way the Scandinavians share their history and their culture in a very thoughtful way, and you find that in the museums. You're so vain, you probably thought this phone booth was about you. This is Rick's telephone. Rick is the word for national, I think. So you see Rick on the money, you see Rick on the big buildings, and you see Rick on the telephones. It's just a favorite phone booth of mine from way back, and I have a tradition of getting a photograph there every time I'm in Stockholm. A big question for a lot of people is, where are the best Viking artifacts? Have you asked that with your friends? Sometimes you just talk and you kind of think, where are the best Viking artifacts? Well, the best Viking ships are in Roskilde outside Copenhagen and in Oslo. The Viking Ship Museum in Oslo at Bygdøy is closed for a couple of years, so it's Roskilde for the ships. The Viking Museum in Oslo, where the ships are, has great artifacts, but it's closed. There's a tacky commercial, one of those new kind of museums that have no artifacts, that is trying to capitalize on the fact that the Viking ships are closed in Oslo. And it's, I think it's called Planet Viking or something like that. It's really not worth the $25 they want you to pay in Oslo. If you want to see the best Viking artifacts anywhere, it's disappointing in Oslo, I got to say. It's at the National Museum in Stockholm. Don't miss that when you're in Stockholm. I don't have photographs that adequately show it. I mean, here's a skull inside the chain mail, the soldiers. But I mean, the Vikings, You want to learn about the Vikings, do it in Stockholm at the National Museum. Also, if you want to see the Vasa, a ship that, 350 years ago on its maiden voyage, sailed into the harbor. All the sailors ran to one side to wave goodbye to their loved ones. The king insisted on more cannon on the top level, so it was top heavy. A little breeze came. The whole big ship, the pride and joy of Sweden, tipped over, sank. State-of-the-art, best, most powerful, formidable ship in Europe, and it went straight to the bottom of the harbor. and it stayed there for 300 years until it was discovered in the middle of the 1900s. It was brought to the surface. It was preserved with chemicals so all that rotten wood stayed solid. And today, it gives us an incredible look at a medieval warship. And we get to see that when we go to the Vasa in Stockholm. And this is just, I took this photograph because this is a trick. When you're going to these great sites, it's expensive to get in. The tours are free. If there's a tour, take advantage of it. It's really, really good. One of those tour guides that leads that tour is Håkon, my friend. I saw him there with a group of 10 people teaching his heart out like these great guides do. This is Håkon and Ilva. These are two of our Rick Steves guides. They live in a beautiful little home or a condo right in the old town. As a matter of fact, they proudly let our guides drop into their house, and we get to meet them and look around their house and have a little moment with a Swedish couple. And we have a chance to ask questions. It's just a reflections time in the middle of Sweden because the Swedes have a lot to share about their sensibilities and their way of life, and we can learn from that. And this is what we're excited about in our program. The quality of our guides like Ilva and Håkon, and their passion for sharing what they think is beautiful about their culture, as Ilva and Håkon do when our groups drop into their house and when I do. This is this is the favorite thing about my work, I gotta say. It's so fun. I'm so thankful for my work. And here you can see, this is the last, one of the last days on my whole trip. And I was at 6 o'clock on Saturday. I'm meeting Jessica. And this is the stuff I gotta be mindful of. And these are the places I wanna go to with Jessica. Looks like we've done all of them with our rounds that evening. And tomorrow I get Simone at 10 and I get Zenid at 6. And then the next day I'm going to the US Embassy, and the next day I'm flying home. But that was just, and here's what I want to do with Simone the next morning. So it's a lot of organization, a lot of details. I've been spending all week since I got home finishing up my maps and making sure all my little notes, my scratchy notes are carefully put into the book for the next edition. The new edition of Scandinavia that I've had so much fun working on, and that Ben's going to help finish off for two very important chapters, Helsinki and Tallinn. This will be out in June of 2024. So until then, this is the best book in print. It's lovingly done. It sells as much as all the others put together for good reason. It's the guidebook that is lovingly updated, and the new book will be better yet. So that's not just important from a Scandinavia point of view. That's how we do the 50 guidebooks that have Rick Steves on the title. This is the changing of the guard at the Royal Palace in Stockholm. And I took the picture this way because this is the POV, the point of view of a 2-bit slimy little pickpocket, okay? He's not looking at the changing of the guard. He's looking at your butt, because on your butt is a wallet. And you can see all of those pockets, and you can see who's got a wallet, who's got a button, who's got a zipper, who's vulnerable. There's jostling, there's crowds, there's pickpockets, and even in cute little Scandinavia, thieves target tourists. These days, when local people don't have any cash, thieves target tourists even more because we're the people that have cash. Don't be sloppy. I love going to the restaurants that our tour groups go to, and this is one of them, a beautiful, beautiful dining hall in a traditional old dining hall in a colorful corner called Södermalm of Stockholm. And here is the menu. And I just love looking at this menu. You can see the price in crowns there. And I just have this shot so you can see how expensive Stockholm is. Notoriously, fearsomely expensive. There's 10 crowns in $1 now. So here you see the dinner courses. These are the main courses. Each one of these is a complete dinner. And if you look at those prices, 10 crowns in $1, you just take the last digit off, divide it by 10, and you can see these are dinners that cost $26, $32, $26, $30. Desserts are $12. It's the same as the United States of America if you go to a nice restaurant, and this is a nice restaurant, except this includes tax and this includes tip. When you're looking at those numbers, remember, it's expensive. Life is expensive. Our restaurants are expensive. They're the same price, and this is 20% cheaper, 25% cheaper, depending on how much you tip, because it includes tax and tip. and it's in English, and it's tasty. And then afterwards, you can go to a viewpoint like this and have a beer with all the locals. This is the kind of place I love to recommend. This is just a viewpoint overlooking Stockholm where people just love to hang out. It's a beautiful outdoor pub. I was so thankful to be invited to our ambassador. This is the ambassador from the United States to Sweden. And we had so much fun. He showed me around. We had a beer together. I got to give a talk. He invited all his staff and people from the community that would be interested. For instance, this one man in the center there is a Sami activist, and he's in town advocating for the needs of the Sami people. And I was just really impressed by the caliber of the children of our foreign diplomatic staff. It is such a blessing for kids whose parents are diplomats to be able to grow up bopping from one position to the other around the world, getting to know all these beautiful places and all these interesting people. I had so much fun at the ambassador's house in Sweden. Then I flew to Grand Rapids, of all places, in Michigan. And I got to share my symphonic journey, which is something I've been doing more and more. This is Bob Bernhardt, and this is just a moment in their wonderful concert hall there in Grand Rapids. And I love collaborating with these amazing conductors all over the United States when they enjoy bringing my symphonic journey to their community. This is the conductor Keith Lockhart of the Boston Pops that I did just a couple months ago. And we have a great chance to celebrate travel and good tour guiding on stages of great concert halls all over the United States. I've got several scheduled for the rest of this year, and it's a chance for us to keep on traveling even when we're at home. I hope that you've enjoyed this up-to-date look, or this look at how we update our material on one corner of Europe. I sure am inspired by the travelers I get to meet on the road who have nice books that are well worn and marked up and tabbed and so on, because people are turning their travel dreams into smooth and affordable reality by using our information and putting it to work. Well, I had a great trip, and now I'm happy to be back home for a month to kind of be an American, just do stuff that people do here on their summer vacation. All right, Ben, boy, I don't know about you, but I enjoyed sharing that information. I had a chance to relive all the fun I had in the last month.
Oh, Rick, you took us straight back to Scandinavia, and I'm ready for those notes. Bring it on.
All right, you're my man. I can hardly wait to let you finish up what I started in Tallinn and in Helsinki. And I know you're going to just nail it because you've lived there and studied there.
I'm looking forward to it, Rick. Really am. I'm Team Finland tonight.
Hey, very nice.
All right. Well, Rick, before we get to some questions, and Lisa has really sent me quite a few excellent questions, how about a word from our sponsor?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I've got one more shot that I didn't, I neglected to show. I think I can share that right now. There you go. You're looking at that okay? This is one of the groups that I got to meet while I was traveling this year. And, you know, this is just a joy for me when I'm traveling, is to bump into our groups. James is the tour guide. He's the man right in the middle there with the beard. And our guides, this is I believe it's right at the end of their tour. And I think this was a Spain tour, because I was in Spain earlier this year. But look at the faces. Look at the joy on those faces. These are people who have invested, and it's a big investment to take a tour, but we've got the best guides in Europe. We include everything in our tours. It's just a really, really a straightforward kind of a tour program. And people that invest in this tour, they go home thinking that was money very well spent. That was time very well spent. And for me, who's got his name on these tours, you know, we've taken, 500 tours so far this year in 2023. Half of our program is finished now, and we're getting ready for the other half that starts just in a couple of weeks. I'm so thankful for the work our guides are doing and the trust all of these travelers put in us. We just had a little party at our staff last week because we crossed a threshold. We've sold 15,000 seats for 2024. That's half of our total. And we've got 40 different itineraries. And if you have any travel dreams going on and you want to learn more about what we have to offer, we've got a dynamite program. And I'll tell you, I get to meet these groups all over Europe and see guides like James and what a great job they're doing. See guides like Paul, who you just saw, and Ilva and Hakan, all over Europe, every corner of Europe. We've got great people doing great stuff. So if you're thinking about getting a tour, well, that's the word from our sponsor, Rick Steves Europe. It's a tour program that I'm really proud of.
The tours are exceptional, Rick. Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Our first question comes from Chris. If you had to choose only one country to visit as a first timer, would it be Iceland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, or Finland?
No. I wouldn't, if I was a first timer, I wouldn't, personally, I would not go to just one country because the capitals are so distinct. They're great cities and they're so easy to get to. They're relatively cheap and easy to get to. So let's say you have 10 days. I would not go to Iceland. And no offense, Ben, because I know you love and no one loved Finland, but I'd save that for later. Oslo, I mean, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. It's great. Those are three. They're all five cities. Capitals are great. My favorites are the three capitals of the core: Copenhagen, Oslo, Stockholm. And I remember in the Eurail days, I would always tell people, if you get as far north as Copenhagen, because people are doing Europe with the Eurail pass, go further, because a lot of people think, oh, it's just another Scandinavian capital. Each of those capitals, Copenhagen, Oslo, Stockholm, and of course Helsinki, are distinct. They're different. And if you have 3 days, 3 nights, it's worth it. Okay, that's my workaround answer. If you had to just choose one country to go to, I got to say Norway, because Norway's got the diversity. It's got the mountains. It's got 2 great cities. It's got beautiful small towns. It's got hikes. It's got fjords. It's got Oslo. Oslo is the most changed of all the cities that I saw on my trip. And the dollar is strong. It's 10. I couldn't believe you can get a beer in Oslo for the same price as in Seattle. That's unthinkable. It's the dollar is strong, 10 crowns to $1.
Well, you know what, Rick, I agree with you. I think Norway is probably the best choice if I really had to answer that difficult question.
Yeah.
A practical question. What time of year is best for visiting Scandinavia, and should off-season be considered to beat Icelandic crowds?
You know, every tourist industry is a vital part of the well-being of a society's general economy over there. And their frustration, just like ours is, everybody wants to go in the peak season, and people try to con people into going at the times of year that aren't as nice. So, you know, every tourist industry will say, oh, it's great in November. Or, you know, wonderful, the midnight sun and the aurora borealis. Well, maybe you can make a case for that. Personally, when I go to Scandinavia, I want long days, I want good weather, and I want crowds. I want crowds in Scandinavia because that enlivens things. Because what you got in Scandinavia is moderate crowds or dead. That's kind of harsh, but in France and England and Holland and Germany, you got all sorts of levels of crowds and peak season. But in Scandinavia, it's either on or off. And I like it to be on. I like the English tours to be going. Most of the places that I'm listing, they've got a season and then it's just weekends after that. So 2 tours every day, all week long, from June through September. And then a tour on Saturday and a tour on Sunday after that. So I like to go when there's a lot of people because it invigorates the sightseeing experience. You got longer days, you got balmy weather. And I've been in Scandinavia in the off season. If it's raining, if it's windy, I don't see the charm in that, frankly. So that's my candid opinion on that.
Speaking of weather, do you think rising temperatures will result in an increase in tourism in the Nordic countries in the future?
Absolutely. It's tragic. I see a lot of Italians in Stockholm these days. Why are they in Stockholm? Why would an Italian go to Stockholm? Only one reason: to avoid their heat. That's why they're there. And we've got climate change. And I'm so fired up about this climate change thing. You know, we can do something about this. I just saw a 60 Minutes episode today about the biggest wind farm in Europe, and it's in England. And it's producing 15% of all of England's energy needs. Windmills out in the sea. We can do that. We're spending enough money to barricade Galveston from the next hurricane that we could buy off every coal miner in West Virginia and have money left over. You could set them all up and they could have wealthy retirements. and we could wean ourselves from fossil fuels. It's disingenuous is a gentle word for anybody that doesn't recognize the reality of climate change and the fact that we could do something about it. We're part of the problem because we're traveling. But we've got a program at Rick Steves Europe where we invest $1 million every year to mitigate the carbon we create when we travel. And then we travel in a way that broadens our perspectives and makes us activated citizens of the planet. So we come home and we live our lives and we vote and we exercise the power we have as citizens of this powerful country to think about what's best for the world, not just what's best for us and what's best for sustainability in the future and what's best for south of the border. So we honestly mitigate the carbon that we create with the $1 million we smartly invest. And we explain that in our Climate Smart program. But it's a real serious problem. And you'll see that. You'll see Scandinavia doing admirable things because they're going to be totally wind powered. They're going to be totally green powered and no fossil fuel within the next few years, I think. They're really on a roll. And I just met somebody at the ambassador's residence in Stockholm who's working in a Swedish company that is making huge strides towards having a flying Tesla, an electric powered airplane. And that's on the horizon, but it needs to be all hands on deck. And we got to get serious about it here in the United States.
Rick, I would be doing us a disservice if I didn't ask the most popular question in the Q&A out of 350 submissions. Will there be an Iceland tour in our future?
I can't say yes or no in the long term. I'm always the one who says no until it's the right time. Right now, the answer is no. We have 46 itineraries. I think we've got great itineraries. Iceland it's an isolated island. It's a great island to travel through. There's great tours available there, but it's not the kind of culture heavy kind of itinerary that we like in our tours. It's more of a adventure travel itinerary, and that's not our forte. It's also a situation where the demand will exceed the supply, and that'll put us at a disadvantage with getting a good value for our travelers. And I just don't want to play that game. So I will not be doing a tour of Iceland in the foreseeable future. I would wager that I'll change my mind in a few years. But right now, that's my mindset. We're going to make a great 2 TV shows. It'll be a 1-hour special. It'll air all over public television in the United States next year. Our guidebook. People absolutely love this guidebook, and I'm not bragging. I'm complimenting Cameron Hewitt and Ian Watson and the people who have spearheaded the production of this Iceland book. This is really a book that is a godsend to anybody that's going to Iceland. And if you do this, you don't need no stinking tour.
Very true. Very true, Rick. Well, we have time for just one more question from Jill. Rick, what is your one food or beverage of choice in Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Sweden, and Norway? It's a long list.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's not Solo. That's so funny you asked that because I have Solo here. I forgot to mention this. This was my drink of choice when I was a teenager, and it's still there. This is the Norwegian Fanta. And you have your Solo with your little wiener, your pulsa. And it was really fun, but I don't like Solo anymore. I like craft beers in Scandinavia, and I like my akavit. I don't like wine in Scandinavia. I just like to consume local. And the beers are local, and the wine is certainly not. Is that my last question?
It is, Rick.
I'm just going to have to say goodbye to everybody, eat the rest of my beautiful open-faced sandwiches. Hey, as you mentioned, Ben, our next Monday Night Travel is September 25. And I understand I will be just home from an amazing trip in Poland and Turkey. I'll be producing 2 shows with our crew and with Cameron again in Poland, and then I'll be flying to Istanbul, and I'll be working on our Istanbul book, and I'll have all sorts of ideas to come home and share about Poland and Iceland. Poland and Istanbul. Put that on your calendar, September 25th. That's when we kick off, our 4th season of Monday Night Travel? That's right. Really cool. I want to remind everybody that we wouldn't get to first base on Monday Night Travel without our wonderful crew. We've got Ben, we've got Lisa, we've got Julianne, we've got Gabe, and we've got all of you. We appreciate your support, and we've got a lot of travels to share going forward. So Ben, thank you so much for hosting. or moderating. And thank all of you. Happy travels. And again, you've got lots of information that'll come to you tomorrow about links to places we talked about and about some new information. And right now, we'll just say happy travels. Ciao. Good night, Ben.
Good night, Rick. Good night, Lisa. Good night, everyone.